Don't tell me my job. Rubio fires back as tensions explode in a fiery face-off with Jayapal, shutting down the confrontation in seconds. When the debate turned into a power struggle over authority, Rubio didn't blink. He snapped back with a line that instantly flipped the room. And just when it couldn't get more intense, the moment lands with a twist that feels like somebody brought a script to a knife fight and forgot the knife.
Representative Jayapal.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here. On March 21st, 2025, the State Department approved the revocation of a student visa for Rümeysa Öztürk, a Turkish citizen who is a graduate student at Tufts University, apparently simply for writing an op-ed. According to an internal State Department memo, you took this action under your discretionary authority to revoke visas, and soon after you revoked her visa, armed and masked plainclothes officers snatched Ms. Öztürk off the street and transported her to a prison in Louisiana. Mr. Secretary, do you really think that Ms. Öztürk's op-ed results in a foreign policy consequence for the United States?
I believe that case involves someone whose visa we never would have granted had we known ahead of time.
I'm not asking you that question. I'm asking you if you think an op-ed, but that's exactly, in fact, what happened. The State Department wrote a memo concluding that you did not have sufficient grounds to revoke Ms. Öztürk's visa. There was no evidence showing that she'd engaged in any activities that were a threat to national security. And in fact, in May, a federal court ordered Ms. Öztürk's release from detention, noting that the sole basis for the government's detention appeared to be the fact that she co-authored this opinion piece in the Tufts newspaper in March of 2024. Where in the Constitution does it say that the Secretary of State can override the First Amendment protections of free speech? Is there a footnote that I missed somewhere?
There's no constitutional right to a student visa.
So, but is there a constitutional right? Does it say somewhere that Marco Rubio gets to determine which speech is appropriate and revoke student visas based on what you think constitutes free speech?
There's a statute that says the Secretary of State gets to determine whether someone is a threat. We deny visas every day all over the world.
Do you think that the Immigration and Nationality Act trumps the Constitution of the United States, Mr. Secretary?
Well, Congress can always change the law if you want, but I'm telling you,
Mr.
in the meanwhile, I have the authority, I will
clear.
continue to revoke the visas of these people that come here to tear this country apart.
You said that, Mr. Secretary. Let me reclaim my time because you are talking about revoking student visas based on what somebody says. And that means that you are trumping the legal Supreme Court, the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution of the United States.
No one has a right to a student visa.
Mr. Rubio, why did the administration need to use masked, armed, unidentified agents to whisk somebody off the street and deny her counsel for almost 24 hours after her arrest?
Well, you'll have to ask the agencies that did that work. I'm not responsible for that. I'm responsible for revoking the visas of these people that come to tear this country apart.
Secretary Rubio, I'm talking about this particular case where you revoked the student visa of a Turkish citizen who was a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that you didn't like. And suddenly you allowed for masked men to whisk her off the street. And you have multiple jobs, apparently. You're the national security advisor as well. So don't tell me it's not your job who snatches her off the street.
We don't do the snatching, but I can tell you we do the visa revocations.
Let me ask you about the national security consequences of people, masked men on the streets, snatching people off the streets. If these are legitimate law enforcement agents carrying out proper arrests, why are they hiding their identities?
Because then radical crazies will try to hurt them.
So you think that U.S. agents who have almost always gone without face coverings, even when they're arresting some of the country's most dangerous criminals, suddenly have so much to fear from a graduate student who wrote an op-ed that they need to be masked? Is that
that law student was a guest in the United States on a student visa. No one's entitled to a student visa.
So you revoked her student visa based on an op-ed which trumps the supreme law of the land, which is the Constitution.
Someone's coming up here to stir up problems on our campus. We're going to revoke their visa.
She didn't do any of that. She wrote an op-ed. She wrote an op-ed, and I'm talking to you about her particular case.
Claims and your claims. Those are not the facts.
Reclaiming my time, you revoked her student visa because she
proudly.
wrote an op-ed.
Would you revoke? We're going to do more.
I have another question for you. Would you revoke the visa of someone in the United States who published claims that, quote, Jews are an untrustworthy and dangerous group? Yes or no?
We will revoke the visa of anyone who's in this country as a guest who's here to stir up trouble.
Are you going to revoke the visa of somebody who made that?
Send me the case. I'll look at it. I'm looking to get crazy people
Actually,
our
it's not
country.
just about revoking.
Forward
You
to
actually,
revoking the visas
Secretary
of any
Rubio,
lunatics you
excuse
can
me,
identify.
reclaiming my time. Can you explain to me why the Trump administration granted refugee status to Charles Kleinhaus, the white Afrikaner who tweeted that exact statement that I just said? There's the case.
That's not a visa.
You granted that person
That's
to
a
enter
totally
the
different
United
process.
States.
That's someone that applied here through a totally different process.
Secretary Rubio,
student visas are a privilege.
Secretary
we deny
Rubio,
them all the time, and we'll revoke them.
You revoked a visa based on an op-ed, and then you allowed for masked men to snatch somebody off the street.
Your time is expired.
That's your claim. That's not accurate.
Recognized ranking.
So here's what's going on in simple terms. A congressman questioned Secretary Rubio about a case involving a Turkish graduate student who had her visa revoked after co-authoring an opinion piece. That same student was later detained by federal agents and taken into custody. Critics argued there was no clear national security threat and even pointed to internal government discussions suggesting the justification wasn't strong. A court later stepped in and ordered her release, which only added more attention to the case. So now the big question becomes, was this a proper use of executive authority under immigration law or an overreach that edges into punishing speech? Let's break this down calmly because there are two separate arguments colliding here. First, Rubio's position is straightforward. Student visas are not rights, they are privileges. And under immigration law, the executive branch does have broad discretion to revoke them if it believes there are security concerns. That part is legally grounded. Immigration enforcement has always given the executive wide latitude. But here's where the tension starts. Jayapal's line of questioning pushes something different, not just legality, but principle. She's asking whether speech, specifically an op-ed, can become the practical trigger for removing someone from the country. And that's where constitutional concerns come in. Because even if someone is on a visa, the United States has always drawn a strong line between actions and expression. Speech alone has traditionally been the most protected form of liberty in the American system. Now, during the exchange, Rubio doubles down on authority. He essentially says the executive branch is responsible for making those determinations, and Congress can change the law if they disagree. And you can see the philosophical divide right there. One side is focused on enforcement discretion. The other side is focused on limits to that discretion. That's not just a policy disagreement. That's a structural debate about how much power the executive should actually hold. And just to be fair, enforcement agencies do have operational concerns. That includes safety, procedure, and discretion in sensitive cases. But in a constitutional republic, the concern isn't just whether power exists, it's how far it can reasonably stretch before accountability starts to weaken. This is why moments like this matter, not because of one case, but because of what it signals about precedent. If you're still watching, take a second to subscribe, because these hearings often reveal more about how power actually works than any official press release ever will. And then comes the flashpoint. Jayapal presses harder, questioning whether Rubio is effectively overriding constitutional protections through executive discretion. Rubio fires back, "Don't tell me my job." And that's the moment everything tightens. Because underneath the tension, what you really see is a clash over who defines the boundaries, Congress or the executive. Not personal, not emotional, just two branches refusing to yield ground on authority. And in that silence after the exchange, you can feel the weight of what's actually being debated.